Hi, I'm Sean, also known as SwingUpper, and this is my guide on how spells work in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is going to be a very literal guide of how spells actually work on a character sheet. It will not go over individual spells, and this video will have 3 sections. First, explain what each spell does. Second, explain how characters actually cast their spells, whether that is prepared, spontaneous, whatever. And then go over the rules for wands and staves. I'm not going to be giving recommendations for exact things, that will come in a later video. So, what are spells first? Because not every caster gets access to every spell, and that is defined by your spell list. And each spell list is defined by two of the 4 essences of magic. This diagram here shows it. It will not make sense to you unless you already know what I'm talking about. So, let's start with each of the essences first. First essence is matter. This is where you get your fireballs, okay? It has all your big area spells, your fire, your lightning, your cold, all those things. So if you want to play a caster that does high damage, you're going to be wanting to pick one of the lists that has matter as one of its essences. That means picking an arcane or primal caster. Now, the mind one, it's a lot of fear spells, a lot of mental manipulations, a lot of illusions. So you pick a mind one if you want to play a more tricksy character, and this is given to arcane and occult casters. Spirit is really more about buffs and removing debuffs. That is its primary purpose, is that it plays a lot in the math of the game, and lets you really shift things around with a lot of floating +1s and +2s, that you can then put together to make people way stronger. And that's its main purpose, is putting those in for different situations. Life primarily gives you access to healing, and healing. It doesn't sound like that's a big deal, but this is probably the single most game-changing one, because the access to instant burst healing is pretty restricted to just spell lists with the life domain. So if you want to play a divine or primal caster, expect to be casting a few heal spells. But how does each actual spell list play? Because that's far more important than knowing the theory behind why they have what they have. So let's start with Arcane. This is your best offensive spell list. They can target any DC really easily, because they have all the reflex and fortitude saves that matter would give you, as well as all of the will DC stuff that mind would give you. So that lets them have a lot of different abilities to attack people. And they're useful in getting knowledge gathering as well, because again, that mind domain, a lot of other tricksy stuff that they can be doing. Large variety of the debuffs, again, from that mind essence. Good area effects from matter, because fireball, matter. So, also has electric arc. This is actually a big deal, because electric arc is the highest damage cantrip in the game. So it gives you access to something that will let you keep up with martials even when you're out of spell slots, which is a big deal. It can't heal at all, though. Like, just no healing on its list at all, so there will be no magical healing. And its flagship caster is the Wizard. Then you have the Cleric, which is your best defensive list, really. It doesn't target enemies that frequently. It does have some spells that would target an enemy and have them make a save, but its job is not really targeting enemies, which gives you a lot of consistency, because your spells don't really require rolls to work. They are very high damage to undead, because a lot of heal spells, when used on undead, damage them. So, heal spells going off does damage undead as well as healing your allies, which is interesting and something to note. They have all the best buffs, all the best heals. That is the Divine Caster's job. They're weaker at most things that involve damage, especially in the cantrip slots. So, in the early game, when you're going to be reliant on cantrips a lot, you're going to want to have a weapon, or ask your GM to give you Torturous Trauma, which is for sure a name. But if you look at it mechanically, it's just a basic save to do some damage that can never kill something, which actually hasn't make a lot of sense for good aligned characters, but that's a ask your DM type thing, and then reflavoring and doing a whole lot of other stuff. It normally comes in Bloodlords, but you can find Narcos Nethys, it's already in Foundry. So ask your GM if you want to play Divine Caster and you're worried about running out of slots and being useless. Otherwise, get a weapon, you'll be fine. Its flagship caster is the Cleric, because that's kind of what you'd expect. Now you have the Occult Casters. And the thing about the Occult Casters is that they tend to target the will saves heavily. And they have a hard time affecting mindless creatures, because so much of what they do is focused on getting to people's heads and affecting people's emotional states. So they have a lot of weirdness going on in terms of picking their spells, because you'll want to make sure that you're not useless as soon as the GM says, oh, this zombie doesn't have a brain. It has all the best buffs and debuffs, because it has Mind and Spirit going on, so you can use Spirit to buff your allies, Mind to debuff your enemies, so you can find a lot of weird stuff to do in there. Has some measure of damage spells, some healing from Soothe, but it's not going to be as efficient at damage as Arcane Primal. It's not going to be as efficient at healing as Primal Divine. You're just kind of there. It's a jack-of-all-trades spell list. And they struggle at area damage in specific. There are some spells that let you get around that a little bit, but you should mostly leave area damage to your Primal and Arcane casters. And its flagship caster is Bard, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're just looking at the name Occult and then see Bard next to it. But if you think, what kind of caster would affect people's minds and talk to people's souls? And then Bard starts to make a bit more sense, and that gives Bard a lot of interesting flavor for, you do have a little bit of the dark magic in a Bard. You can choose to ignore that and play a happy-go-lucky Bard, that's fine, but I think there's a lot of storytelling potential in going to the darker magics, even on your brighter casters. And Primal casters play the game the way I played Pokemon when I was 6 years old. They only care about the HP number. They do damage, they heal, that's their job. Primarily targets Reflex and Fortitude because they don't have Mind Essence. They can't really affect people's minds. They just kind of blast people. Or heal people. Great area damage, has Electric Arc, has healing like Divine Casters. Again, struggles at targeting those will saves. So you're going to have like first level Spears like the only thing you have to target will saves for a good amount of your adventuring career. Very few just raw numeric buff spells as well. You have stuff like Enlarge and Haste, but that's kind of it in terms of how you can help your party. Well, that and your healing, but yeah. And the flagship caster is Druid, because like what do you expect? And this does mean Druids are as efficient at area damage as Wizards in the system, which is cool. Now, types of casting. First, let's go over cantrips. These are spammable. They automatically heighten based on your character level, and it's getting caught behind the webcam, but you know, whatever. Trust me, it says character level. Spells heighten at each odd character level. So this means if you are a level 3 character, you're going to be casting second level cantrips because you'd only have access to like second level slots. And the mathematical formula behind that is you divide your character level by 2 and then round up, which is just so clumsy. I think that we shouldn't have been calling spells by spell level and character level because that's so awkward, but yeah. Can be cast an unlimited number of times, but no matter how you gained access to them. If you have Detect Magic prepared, or in your spell list, and it's on your sheet, you can then cast it an unlimited number of times per day. That's the point of a cantrip. There's a limited number you can have at a time. For most spellcaster classes, they give you 5. But, you know, they're infinitely spammable. And then you have the focus spells. These heighten at the same rates as the cantrips, automatically based on your character level. Spells heighten each odd character level, blah, 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 just like the cantrips. Casting them costs a single focus point. And this focus point can then be refocused if you just take a, 10-minute snack break. Different classes will flavor this in different ways. Like a wizard would read over their spellbook, a monk would go sit and meditate for a while, but generally you just spend 10 minutes refocusing your magical power. However that looks for your character is good. And you can't refocus several times in a row without spending points. So you have maximum 3 points, because, you know, the different maximums happen based on the feats you take and whatever. If you have a maximum of 3 points and spend all 3, you then go down to 0. You can refocus back up to 1, but you can't then refocus again back up to 2. You're then just stuck at 1 until you finish a long rest. Let's start talking about the spontaneous type casting now. This is like a major way that characters would cast things from their spell list, and this is the way that bards do it, and they fill up a repertoire of their spells that they can cast in a given day. The repertoire does include their cantrips, but again, the cantrips are listed separately from the number of spells you have learned, and for most casters, they get 5, and they just stay at 5 unless they take other feats to change that. Slots are converted to spells during the day. You can fuel whatever rocket you want. If you want to think of your spells as just a thing that you need to fuel, you can decide where that fuel is going in the middle of the day. And you can only cast spells at the level you prepare them. So if you casted something like Magic Missile at first level, you can't just cast it with a 5th level slot to get more missiles. But every 2 levels you get to pick a signature spell that you can do that with. So, yeah. And another thing to know about Spontaneous is after you pick your spells, you're going to be stuck with them until you retrain out of them by spending a week of downtime. So Spontaneous can't swap out what rockets they have, but they can fuel any rocket in the middle of a day. in contrast with prepared casters, where you can swap out your prepared spells each day. And you can only cast each spell once unless you prepare it in several slots. Because at the beginning of the day, you determine this slot will be for Fireball, this slot will be for Heal, and then you have to cast one Fireball and one Heal from those slots, because you can't swap what each slot had prepared. Because you need to have that preparation done. You distribute your fuel in the morning, but you can pick what rockets you have to put fuel in that same morning. After you cast a spell, you scratch the slot off your list. Cantrips are still fine, you can still cast them as many times as you want. And as I mentioned before, you can prepare the same spell in several slots to get several casts fit in a day. But that's more of a thing that you'd want to do for your like major spells that you know you're going to want to cast several times. Like a cleric or a druid would probably want to cast heal a lot of times, so they'd probably prepare it a lot of times. And this would be for things like the wizard, cleric, and druid. Innate. This is something that you more see from ancestry feats and GM creatures like demons. And it's the worst parts of spontaneous and the worst parts prepared. You just put the worst parts together, and that's what you get from the innate spells. You are locked into the specific spells X times per day, so it's like you have filled slots prepared, but you don't get to pick what's in them like your spontaneous. Cantrips are still unlimited unless you have an explicit thing saying otherwise, so they're mostly unlimited. It's like you have prepared slots, but you don't prepare the slots. Yeah. Basically, the innate will just say, you can cast this once per day. You can cast it once per day. There's nothing you can do about it. Now, for the important items. Scrolls. These are non-focus spells, so they can include cantrips. If the spell is on your list, you can cast it by holding the scroll and spending the proper amount of actions. So if you had Produce Flame, you could spend 2 actions and cast Produce Flame from the scroll. After that, the scroll is just destroyed, turns to dust, falls out of your hand, whatever. However your GM and you decide to flavor how you use scrolls, it is destroyed, cannot be repaired. It is a consumable, it is used, it's done. There are consumable spell slots you can buy, and it's very expensive to use them with the high-level spells, but it's really good for low-level spells you'll want once in a blue moon, but really don't want to be about. So this could be stuff like Illusory Disguise, Comprehend Language, Create Water, Gentle Repose, things that you don't want to be caught without if you suddenly need them, but you really don't want to have to waste like prepared slots or anything else on making sure you have these. You can just buy the scroll for a trivial amount of gold in the mid to late game and just have it with you, and then you're fine. Wands. So wands are kind of like scrolls, but they also say non-cantrip here. If the spell is on your list, you can cast it by holding the wand and spending the proper amount of actions. So it'd be, again, 2 actions to cast something like Fireball. You could cast Heal with any 1 to 3 actions and get the proper form of Heal, whatever. First cast, risk-free, goes off without a hitch. Second cast has a 45% chance to permanently destroy the wand, so you can't repair it. That's what the DC 10 flat check is. It means that if you use your wand several times in a day, it has a % chance to just break. That's not good. So general advice is to just use your wands once. Anything after that second cast instantly fails, and destroys your wand, so don't even try it. Best for spells you know you want to cast exactly once per day, and some examples could be Endure Elements, which makes it easier to travel in areas that have extreme weather, Long Strider, which gives you a move speed boost for an extended period of time, or Alarm to set a barrier around camp. Now, Staves. Staves have 3 slides because they have a lot of rules around them, and they're also pretty important. They contain non-focus spells. So that's just an important note. They do contain cantrips, they do contain level spells. You can prepare 1 staff per day as long as at least 1 spell from the staff is on your list, of some kind. Exact nature of how a staff works changes depending on what typecast you are, prepared or spontaneous. They effectively extend the things that you can do each day, and it's best to get a staff that has spells that you can learn, but don't actually want to learn by spending slots or spending spontaneous spells or any of those types of things on them, because the staff will give you access to them midday. And the cantrip from the staff can be cast anytime you're holding the staff for no additional cost, because cantrips are no additional cost in this system, if you haven't noticed. Staff by default has charges equal to the highest level spell you can cast, including your cantrips, So usually it's that same formula of character levels divided by 2 round up, which, nah. I'm just going to call that your max spell level. Prepared staffs. So, when a prepared caster prepares a staff, they can choose to put up to one of their normal prepared slots into the staff and lose access to it for the day. The staff still gains its generic charges based on the high spell level it can cast, but also gains charges based on the level of that slot. So you put in a 4th level slot, you get 4 charges, 3rd level slot, 3 charges, etc., etc. And prepared users can cast a spell from the staff by spending charges equal to the spell level of the thing they're trying to cast. So if you want to cast a 3rd level heal from a staff, you need to spend 3 charges to do so. Easy enough. Now for spontaneous casters, it works a bit differently. They gain no special benefit when they prepare a staff, like no special mechanic to get more charges on the staff. And staff just has the normal amount of charges. So if you could cast 5th level spells, it would have 5 charges. Just like that. A spontaneous user can spend a charge from the staff and one of their spell slots to then cast any of the spells from the staff of the proper level. So if they want to cast a 3rd level heal, they would spend 1 charge from the staff and a 3rd level slot, can cast that heal. Boom. Easy. Other items that are good, Shadow Signet is very useful for high level casters that have a hard time targeting specific DCs, because it lets your spell attacks then target any defensive value you want. And I'd recommend taking a look at all the skill boosting items on Archives of Nethys. They're focused on boosting a skill highly, so there are ones that boost Medicine, ones that boost Nature, ones that boost Arcana. These will not affect your spell DCs directly or spell attack rolls directly, but they will boost your utility out of combat when you're not using your spells. So I would highly recommend them, because you tend to be the ones with the highest mental scores as the casters. So making it so that your skills with that are even more useful is a good spot to invest some of that character gold. And with that, I'll see y'all next video where I go over how to evaluate spells.